Right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Becky, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the English Association, and I'm really pleased to be hosting the session this afternoon. A quick word about the EA. We are a learned society and subject association, which was founded in 1906 to promote, support, and celebrate the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education, from primary and early years through secondary and further to higher education and beyond. And we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you so much to Sarah and Mary for giving us your time so generously. Our members also make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying their membership fees. So if you would like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. It costs just £53 to support our events and campaigning work for a whole year, and you get access to a range of member benefits, including online access to all our journals. Okay, that is enough bump from me. So, Mary, I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Becky, and thank you for the opportunity for us to share our research with you all today. I'm really excited to get to meet more people and to find out your experiences of this topic. So as Becky mentioned, this research is something that me and Sarah have been collaborating on, and Sarah's available in the chat. But I'll begin today by just explaining briefly the context for our research and how it came about in the first place. So back in 2022, as part of a collaborative evidence network research project, which was funded by the Welsh Government to help support post-pandemic recovery in the education sector, myself and Sarah and Mrs. Gwawr Maelor from Bangor University sought to discover the impact of the pandemic on teaching literatures in secondary schools in Wales. And we use literatures plural because we were interested in a number of different types of texts, for example, prose, fiction, non-fiction, poetry and plays. And we were interested in conducting an audit, really, of seeing what texts were taught across a range of subjects that use literature. So not just English itself, but thinking about Welsh language and literature, international languages and drama. And we were inviting teachers selected to participate. We invited them to explain what texts they taught before the pandemic, and then to note if anything had changed from 2020 onwards, and to give the justification for why that change took place, whether it was a direct result of the pandemic or whether other factors as well had influenced the teaching of literatures in this time. So factors like Brexit, Black Lives Matter movement, or whether, for example, in the Welsh context, the introduction of the new curriculum for Wales had affected the decisions behind what texts were taught and why. And we've since published this result, and the full report is available via the Welsh Government website on the Hub, so HWB repository. But alternatively, we've also published a short booklet, which is quite concise, just summarising the key results of that research. And our results found that texts taught are predominantly by white male authors, while people from the global majority are largely excluded. So in our research results, only 6 global majority writers were reportedly taught across all levels and 3 subject areas, and no global majority authors featured in the Welsh language at all in the research findings. And we found that our results do resonate with other contemporaneous studies in England, Wales, and in the UK. So as you know, this does not reflect the diversity of the population in Wales or in the UK generally. And as I'm sure you're aware, diversifying texts taught matters for several different reasons. So it helps to meet statutory requirements to teach the experiences and contributions of Black, Asian and ethnic minority communities and individuals in Wales, past and present. But beyond this policy context, diverse texts benefits all learners from both marginalised and majority groups. Teaching a diverse curriculum helps boost attainment, a sense of belonging, self-esteem and empathy. And it also has the potential to boost engagement with reading, whether for school or for pleasure. And it may even be key to students engaging with and choosing to study literature-rich subjects. The diversity in terms of adding new texts to the curriculum, we were aware that ultimately teachers for GCSE and A-level groups are restricted to what's prescribed on the exam boards under the set texts. But for the whole school groups and just for especially for lower secondary level, when we were talking with teachers, we found that the discoverability of diverse texts was identified as a barrier to teaching a diversified curriculum by teachers with whom we shared the research results. So we wanted to try and address that, and we wanted to help identify different resources that were already existing that could help teachers to discover new and exciting texts to teach with a focus on race and ethnicity. And we're aware that the term diversity is a wide encompassing term, and it can cover other key areas of identity also, but just for the purposes of addressing the curriculum in terms of race and ethnicity, that's what we focused on in this booklet. But some of the entries also include other important identity groups too, and categories. And so what we did was pool together a list of already available resources, as I said, that could help find new texts to teach. We were looking quite predominantly for that lower secondary category, just because that seems to be a place where more freedom is given for teachers to bring in new texts to teach. But with a number of these entries, the texts selected can also be applicable for other age categories as well. Every entry was different, and in the resource booklet that we've created, we've tried to just provide a brief summary of each entry, and we've split the booklet into 3 different categories. We've got entries from different organisations and literacy charities. The second section then looks at publishing houses and booksellers, and then the final section looks at teacher-focused organisations, so resources that have been created by teachers for teachers. And we've also got a list of relevant organisations like the EA, for example, and different resources that are available. Some entries included, for example, a book list with the specific intention for addressing diversity in lower secondary level. Others had supporting materials, and in the video that I've created, I've tried to demonstrate some of the key highlights within each entry. So I'll just, without further ado, I'll share my screen now, and I can show you the Padlet that myself and Sarah have got, which has a number of different booklets, and I'll show you the video as well. So bear with me one moment. I will just share the screen, and I'll also share sound. Okay, so this is a link to the Padlet, and this is what you'll see. And importantly, I highlight that we've made these resources bilingual. So we have our research booklet here in English, but we've also got the resources available in the Welsh language. And we've got separate booklets. We've got one for finding English language texts, and we've also got another booklet which focuses on finding Welsh language texts. So we've got the different options there. But I'll just scroll down and I'll point out that this is the booklet that summarises our key findings from the original research on what literatures are taught and why, and that's available bilingually. So we've got the concise booklet here. We've also got a link to the full article if that is of interest to you. So that's there. But I'll just scroll down now, and what we'll do is I won't play the full video because it is quite long, and we want to make sure that we get time for questions and to hear your thoughts as well. But I'll just show you a couple of highlights from the video, so you get a sense of some of the resources. As I say, every entry is different. It is worth having a look at the booklet and seeing what's applicable to you, whatever you're looking for. So let me just play some of the video now for you. I'll pick a spot in the middle. So I'll pick about a 10-minute clip first of all, and then afterwards there's another sort of 3-minute clip that we'll watch as well. But while we're watching, if there's any questions at all, I'm sure Sarah's mentioned, do feel free to pop them in the chat. Yeah, I'll just play the video now. Okay. So now I think it's time to have a look for new plays. So Bloomsbury have partnered with the Lit in Colour campaign, which I'll explain a little bit more about later. They've come together to create an excellent resource to help teachers find new plays to teach by global majority authors. So if I click this link here, we can see the incomplete Lit in Colour playlist. So this resource is aimed at secondary school level and contains 57 plays presented in alphabetical order by author's surname. So one play per playwright in general is featured, although you can see that a brief resume of their other plays is also given. So for example, in this section, you can see The Christ of Cold Harbour Lane featured in the list, but also there's more plays referenced by Oladipo Agbolage that's listed in this section too. And that's the same for other writers as well. As you go through, you can see if that writer's of interest, you can see the other plays that they've written. So each entry contains a synopsis and a list of themes for each play. So the themes you can see are in purple there. It's quite small here, so I can zoom in a little bit so you can have a closer look. So you can see the themes that are emerging in the plays here. What else have we got? Importantly, we've also got content warnings as well. So that can be helpful in trying to discern the appropriateness of each play for specific levels. And some plays in this list, they vary in terms of form and the type of play that they are. So some plays use verse, some plays are quite poetic in form and structure, some contain music, and they range also in terms of cast sizes as well. For example, we've got a one-woman play here by Michaela Cole called Chewing Gum Dreams, and then on the next page, we've got The Barbershop Chronicles by Inua Ellens. And this is a play that's, it's got quite a large all-male cast. So the plays do vary in terms of characters and whether they're one-person plays or large cast sizes. And overall, this resource features a range of different plays which centre both male and female characters. So there's a wide variety of options available here. And in saying that as well, there's also quite a wide variety of different thematic content available in this list. So at the end of this list, we've got an index that puts all the plays together in terms of theme. So you can see here, this could be quite a helpful way if you were looking to find a specific play about love or family and relationships. You could just search for these plays alone as opposed to flicking through. So there's no indication of age appropriateness given in this resource, but I think the content warnings are quite helpful here to try to discern what's appropriate for what classroom. And now, before I go into further detail about Lit in Colour, I also just want to highlight, if I go back, Penguin's Black Britain Writing Back series, which is a list of books by authors who have focused on Black Britain and the diaspora over the last century. And there's 2 texts in that set in Wales, so it's well worth looking at that list too. So, as I mentioned with the incomplete playlist, it was made in collaboration with the Lit in Colour programme. So let's look at this in further detail now. So in partnership with the Runnymede Trust, the UK's leading equality think tank, Penguin are supporting schools to make English literature more inclusive by increasing students' access to more books by writers of colour. So the Lit in Colour campaign offers material to aid learners from key stages 2 to 5. So Lit in Colour have published a landmark report, which is available under the teachers section, or you can click on that bar there. But if we look at the teachers section, you've got two options. You can look at the 10-minute version, or depending on time, you could also read the full report, which is highly recommended. They also have, if we go back to that search bar here, we've got a parents section and a student section. So there's a variety of different options here to look at. But if we stick with teachers for now, we can also see that Lit in Colour offer different tools for secondary schools in the form of different presentations that you can download and auditing tools as well to help departments to try to discern what texts are currently available to them and what's missing on their curriculum. And they also have a number of teaching resources as well, which are useful. So if we go into free resources, secondary resources, we can see here a range of different options available in terms of, we've got different examples of poetry, non-fiction, fiction, we've got examples for KS3, we've also got a couple of options to help practice for GCSE English language exam, and also for KS5 as well. There's a couple of examples there. So these are really useful packs to go into in further detail. They include videos from the authors themselves and some really nice detailed teaching materials that can go alongside selected extracts of these texts, which is really helpful. But I'm just scrolling back up because importantly for us today, Lit in Colour have given up-to-date book lists, which we can have a look at. So they've done a primary list, but if we scroll down, we'll find the secondary list. So I'll just download this and we can have a browse. And we can see in a moment how this list is made in school level order. So we can browse through years 7, 8, and 9 first, and then followed by years 10 and 11 and 12 and 13. So that might be a nice format if you're looking for texts under a specific age category. So I'll just wait for it to load, and you can see in a moment how this booklet is arranged. So we've got the contents page, we've got a bit more contextual information on the front, and then you can see here quite nicely, we've got the title, the author, the book covers are presented to us, and then we've got a summary of the text. We may have some brief biographical information here about the author, and then lower down, we've got the name of the publisher, the year, and themes highlighted here very briefly, which is quite nice.
I don't know why it's not working.
So this list mainly contains prose fiction with a few memoirs, essays and poetry collections under each age category. So for example, here we can see for lower secondary level, the text Letters to a Writer of Colour, which is a collection of essays. So I also want to highlight while we're here that we've got two authors with connections to Wales in this list. So we've got Natasha Bowen here, who is of Nigerian and Welsh descent. And then further into the list, we've got a non-fiction text called Takeaway by Angela Hui. And Angela Hui was born and raised in the Welsh Valleys. So Hui's parents emigrated from Hong Kong to Wales and they opened a Chinese takeaway. And so this memoir recounts Hui's experience of growing up in her local community. So the list contains several authors with different ethnicities and nationalities from around the world in locations such as Korea, Jamaica, Libya, Sri Lanka, and India, to name a few examples. And most texts on this list are focused on teenagers and young people, and there's a good mix of male and female protagonists. But overall, there is just one play that's listed on this resource, and that is The Empress by Tanika Gupta, and it's in the years 12 and 13 category. So it's right here. So as I mentioned, you can either browse through this resource list by the year level in terms of school, but like the previous resource, the incomplete playlist, there's also an index at the end, which groups the texts together under thematic content. So you can see here the popular themes that emerged. I also found that common themes in this book list were aspects like family, politics, friendship, mental health, coming of age, grief, and feminism, which were also quite popular themes across a range of other lists as well. But equally, in this resource, there were several other quite interesting themes that were less popular that appeared in this list, such as food, music, and foster care. So there's quite a wide variety of different stories being presented here. So why don't we go back to the resource list now? And the last, I'll just skip it to one more entry just so you get another flavour of some of the entries here. So bear with me one moment. Just need to, that's better. I can scroll along to, so I'll just show you one more brief clip after this now. These texts to discern the age appropriateness. My final example today is Funky Pedagogy. Funky Pedagogy is an online platform by Jennifer Webb with the contribution of Gemma Molyneux, and both experienced school teachers. Their website includes a guest blogging platform, which you can see here under Jennifer's blog. They have a free resource library, a CPD shop, as well as links to podcasts and conferences, which may interest you. But today I want to focus on the Reading List project, a free host of texts curated by teachers for teachers. And users have the ability to browse texts by using filters, as we can see now. So there's a number of different filters here to do with genre, but also to do with the age and school level. So we can have a look today, for example, at books by non-white authors. And in a moment, you can see a list of books appear under this filter category. And if we click on one of the books, we'll see some relevant information coming up. We can see the person that's recommended the book, the form and genre, so in this case, prose, historical fiction, the book length, which might be really helpful. I think that's a really good contribution there to this entry. A summary of the text, we've got the age recommendation and a flagging of challenging content. So this text, for example, is suitable for year 7 upwards, and there are some references to death and violence, which older primary readers might find distressing. And what's really nice about this website and this project is that we've got notable reasons for recommending this book. So we've got a bit more information about why the teachers have enjoyed it and why they feel it will be an appropriate text. So there's lots of really nice information here. Now, if I go back, you can see here that unfortunately you're only allowed to click on one filter at a time. So for example, now I've got the books by non-white authors here. And if I wanted, for argument's sake, to find a book for Key Stage 3 level, if I tried to click on KS3, you lose that original filter and a different range of books come up. Some are from the same. So you can notice if you quickly flick through the filters, you might find the same book appears, but it's just worth flagging that that if you click on a different one, it may take you, you may lose that focus of, for example, the books by non-white authors. And what I also want to flag as well is if we go back to that original list, so we're here and we've looked at the first entry, we've had a read. If you want to see the next book in that category, I would recommend not clicking next post because it'll take you to a different post and it may not necessarily be of that list. So it's worth just going back on ourselves and making sure that you're in the same category. So you may find some nice texts, but it's just to remember to keep that focus if that's what your specific search is for. But overall, some really lovely books, and this is a really lovely resource that's been curated for teachers by teachers. And the other resource to mention, So I think I hope that gives you just a brief overview of some of the entries and just a flavour of what the demonstration video is like. Apologies if the quality of the video wasn't as good as it should be. Perhaps it was the share screen function. And I should mention as well that our booklet, it's not an exhaustive list of the resources. There are plenty more brilliant organisations out there who may also have published, particularly in the last couple of months, who may have already published other reading lists too. But what we tried to do, as I said before the video, was just to give teachers and relevant stakeholders a snapshot of the existing support that's available to help find new texts with a focus on race and ethnicity. And in the video as well, I always tried to give a bit more information about each list in terms of thematic content, in terms of characters, and specifically for a Welsh audience, looking at any texts or authors that had connections to Wales. The reasons that we this was that in our original research in 2022, we invited teachers to ask to share what was important to them when selecting new texts, and a number of responses spoke about thematic content, connections to the local area or to a Welsh context, the structure or the form of the piece, for example. So where possible, I did try to flag up in the entries different examples that were applicable to that. So hopefully that gives you just a flavour of what our research has looked like, and I hope the video has been helpful in just navigating some of these websites. I think now is we've got time to discuss. If anyone has any comments or questions, can have a look at the chat as well. But yeah, happy to receive questions or feedback either verbally if you would like, or via the chat. We're happy with either. Yeah, there's the link to the Padlet in the chat as well, which includes all of the booklets and the videos bilingually. Yeah, we have a raised hand if you'd like to go ahead.
Mary, thank you. This was a brilliant session going through this resource. My question is relating specifically to theatrical texts, because you mentioned one resource which only had, I think it was The Empress by Tanika Gupta on their list of texts as the only play, and the rest were all prose and or possibly poetry as well. I suppose my question is, what in your experience is the barrier to theatrical texts being included in these kinds of lists? And I suppose what I'm getting at is, does it make a difference if they're being produced at a local, regional, or even theatre, for example? Is it access to the play text? Is it access to good recordings of the play, etc., etc.? Because, you know, as a very generic example, it's very easy to get decent, footage of Romeo and Juliet, for example. The number of fellow teachers who I've heard about showing the Baz Luhrmann film in their classroom, for example, is massive. But as far as I know, to use it as an example, there's no filmed version of The Empress, widely available. So, what in your experience might be, barriers to that, and do you have any solutions to those barriers? I suppose.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. Thank you so much. It's great to hear about theatre, because that's my that's the area where I love to research the most. That's my background is in drama and new play development. Yeah, it fascinated me that in general, while I was looking for these different entries to include in this booklet, that the majority of these entries included just prose, and mainly prose fiction and non-fiction. There was a few more examples of poetry, and even then just one or two, if any, examples of plays. The exception, obviously, is the resource that I started the video demo with. That's a brilliant, the playlist is brilliant for any teachers or any researchers that are looking for new plays to help with the curriculum. And yeah, I guess I don't know why, perhaps. I don't know if other members of the group might have suggestions. I don't know whether, perhaps thinking about a lower secondary level context, whether there's more emphasis put on teaching prose and non-fiction as opposed to teaching drama, and if drama is being taught, whether there's more of an emphasis on classical drama, like teaching Shakespeare, more pressure put on that, particularly for the GCSE years, where you're then having to analyse Shakespeare plays at length, whether perhaps that's having an impact on the texts being taught at lower secondary level and what's getting the focus. It's not. But I think the barriers are interesting as well, because a number of teachers mentioned when finding new texts to teach, not just the discoverability, but also what are the supporting resources that are available. And I guess that becomes harder again when you're trying to introduce a new play into the curriculum. So I guess the amount of resources around, like as you mentioned, if there's a broadcast of the play, that would be brilliant. For example, now I'm thinking of the playlist, and I mentioned in that playlist the Barbershop Chronicles. So the NT National Theatre Live have got a streamed production of that, so that is accessible, and that's worth highlighting. And then there might be more in that playlist as well that will have hopefully supporting resources, either from something like National Theatre at Home or other companies. But in general, in finding these plays, because obviously my focus as well was on Wales, so it became quite hard not to find diverse plays in terms of race and ethnicity that weren't based in London or Birmingham or another urban city in the UK. So that was interesting to note as well, that if plays are being promoted with an emphasis on race and ethnicity, the challenge then of finding regional plays as well to reflect different communities. So I think that's something that could be taken into account by regional theatres as well, in terms of what new plays they're programming and the representation there. So yeah, it's a really good question. I'll definitely be thinking about that in terms of what barriers are there in terms of new plays. I think it could be, as I mentioned, just to wrap up, the pressure in perhaps lower secondary level to focus more on prose and then perhaps Shakespeare, but also the supporting materials that go around teaching a new play. As well, perhaps in terms of teachers' expertise as well, does the teacher feel confident teaching a new play if perhaps their expertise is in teaching fiction or non-fiction, or Shakespeare even, just having that confidence to teach a new play that's just been published, if it has been published, because again that's another hurdle for new playwriting in the UK, is, you know, has the text been published? Yeah, so yeah, thank you. I'll just check on the chat just in case I've missed something. Yeah, thank you, Lydia. I'm just reading your comment because I mentioned that it's become a statutory requirement in Welsh education context to teach the lives and experiences of Black, Asian and ethnic minority communities and individuals. So in that itself, and in the introduction to the new curriculum, that has hopefully encouraged teachers to find new texts to teach. Sarah could correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that policy is just specifically for teaching literatures, but it could be part of the wider curriculum in terms of teaching history or other aspects, other subjects. But hopefully, obviously, literature is perfect for this, in teaching about the lives of different individuals, and there's plenty of texts, as I've tried to highlight in the booklet, where teachers could bring in new texts to fulfill this requirement. So I definitely think it has encouraged the take up and interest. And I'd be keen to see, because it's quite a new requirement, so I would really like to see how teachers are getting on with this in Wales. I don't know off the top of my head if research has been done to see how teachers are doing this, and if it is happening in literature or in other wider subjects. But should we have the same in the UK, in your opinion? I think so. I think it's important to have these perspectives taught across schools in the UK. Yeah, but I'd be interested to see what's the impact of this upon the Welsh education sector, and we'll see what happens with that. But really good question, thank you. Oh, Fiona's got a really good question again. Thank you. That's a really important point, which I forgot to mention, is that some of these lists do include graphic novels and graphic texts. And some of the book lists as well, they don't give age appropriateness, so they leave it up to teachers to discern what texts are applicable to them. I'm thinking now, definitely the lit in colour reading lists contain graphic novels and illustrated books, but there are other reading lists off the top of my head. I think the BAME Ed network, which is mentioned in the entries, they include illustrated books as well, which could be applicable. So in the resources book, I have highlighted if any of the entries include graphic novels and illustrated texts. I think as well, Books for Keeps have a column called Beyond the Secret Garden, and some of their examples have graphic novels as well. So yeah, that's a really good question and really good point. So thank you. Thank you, Lucy, for your question. And that's currently where we're at with this research, is just sharing this booklet with teachers and finding out the potential impact. I've had personally, when I've shared this, there's been a number of feedback comments that have said that they weren't aware of, if any, of these organisations. That was really quite significant. So that was important. I think the next step would be to follow up with teachers and to find out, okay, what new texts did you introduce and how did that go? What were the challenges? What else can we do to support this work? And a thing that's come up, as I've mentioned just now, is the supporting materials as well. Because speaking to my teacher friends, there's the challenge of finding the text, but it's also if you're up all night and making resources and trying to find lesson plans, that is a huge factor when introducing a new text to teach, and it's not an easy step as well, especially if it's an area that's outside of your expertise too. That's also I suppose can be a big challenge. So I do go back to the Lit in Colour report and their resources, because they do offer really lovely lesson plans. That's really worth flagging. But I think that's the next step, is trying to discern with teachers as well, whether it's finding a new text for KS3, for example, a new play or a prose example, or whether schools might just be trying to add to their libraries. They might be using this booklet for other purposes, not just finding a new text to teach in the autumn term, for example. So we've been trying to gauge with teachers where this is helpful for, but certainly the resources are really important to accompany these new teaching texts. Yeah. Oh, great, thank you, Sarah. I see that you've also added clarification on the curriculum for Wales requirements, and apologies if the curriculum for Wales isn't known too much outside the Welsh context. But essentially they've offered more autonomy for teachers to their own curriculums. It mainly has an impact on, as I mentioned, lower secondary level, because ultimately for GCSE and A levels, they're still following the Welsh Exam Board, the WJC. But there's lots more information on the Welsh Government website if anyone did want to find out more about the reform in Wales. Yeah, I'm just looking through the comments. Thank you, Lydia, for mentioning the Educational Recording Agency as well. That sounds great. Yeah, and yeah, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, The Empress has been quite a popular play. It was revived at the Royal Shakespeare Company last year, and it was performed in the Lyric Hammersmith as well. So it's nice to see that. Yeah, definitely. I'm just reading Andrew Green's questions as well. That's a huge factor in terms of school budgets, in terms of what texts are available and how many schools can purchase at a given time. Yeah, I think that's really important moving forward as well, that perhaps more support is needed for different schools. I know in the lockdown periods in Wales, the Welsh Government did release more funding for texts, but I think that was quite a short-term solution to the lockdown situation and online learning. It would be good to see if there's further financial incentives and financial support for the schools that need to purchase these new texts. In our research as well, I noticed that audiobooks have become quite popular as well, and there were different arguments for and against how audiobooks can be a solution to introducing new texts, and whether I think there's different debates in terms of whether they can result in being more costly or less. But yeah, certainly finance and the school funding is a huge factor in terms of the ability of different schools and departments to diversify their texts. Yeah. Just reading Shanaz's question. Thank you. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know if there has been a more recent audit. It would be good to see, and specifically thinking about the education context now with the introduction of the new curriculum, it would be really interesting to see what's been changed and why, and how teachers have gone about navigating these changes as well. But certainly, you know, this isn't a topic that's just for Wales, but for the UK more broadly, how teachers are going about these changes. Yeah, off the top of my head, and Sarah, do correct me, I can't think of a more of a recent audit personally. As I say, the Lit in Colour campaign, their full report offers really good current statistics, which are really well worth reading. But yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of a recent audit. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary. I'm sorry, it's past. I'm so sorry to interrupt just as we were sort of on a roll, but we'll have to start letting people go. So thank you ever so much to Mary and to Sarah for sharing this incredibly rich set of resources with us. I've learned a lot today. I've taken lots of notes. Thank you very much. We'll share this recording with you all. If you also want anything that's been captured in the chat, let me know and I can always circulate that as well. But it just remains for me to say an enormous thank you to all of you for coming and asking such great questions. And again, to Sarah and to Mary for giving your time so generously. So thank you very much, everybody. I'll let you go and enjoy your evenings. Thank you.
Thank you.